that's a great question. I remember arriving in China, and uh, for those that don't know, you need a VPN in China, which is basically a virtual private network. And what that means is the, you can access several websites that you wouldn't be able to access if you didn't have that from China. So you can't access things like Google and Instagram and Facebook without one of these. And so I didn't have one when I first arrived. And obviously, I went onto Google Maps to try and find my way to the hotel. And I couldn't use Google Maps. And obviously, I was panicking. All the road signs are in Chinese, Mandarin characters.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, everybody. And usually I say this as an introduction, but normally it doesn't apply to the other person that I'm speaking to, because usually we're in a very similar time zone in Europe. But today's guest, he is very, very far away from me. So I'm recording in the morning, which you can see maybe from my eyes that I'm just in the process of waking up, but I've had a few espressos already, so I'm about to perk up any time now. So, that being said, let me introduce our guest of today. Alex, hello and welcome.
Hi, Lewis. And yeah, hello, everybody on the other side of the recording. You're quite right. It's the evening here, so just coming up to 5 p.m. where I am.
Now, where are you?
It's a great question. I'm in Shanghai in China, which is a huge city with a population of over 25 million people.
It sounds very hectic, very crowded, kind of
Mm.
chockable all the time with people all over the place. And I've never been to China, and it's interesting because I've interviewed quite a lot of people, and many of them have spent time in Japan or even Korea. But I haven't actually interviewed anyone yet who lives or used to live in China, so we can get some nice insights from you today. Um, First, why China?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, yes, it absolutely is a very dynamic city. There's so much going on and so many people. At the moment, however, it's Chinese New Year, so it's super quiet. In fact, I went out this morning to meet a friend, and it's just so peaceful and quiet, and it's very refreshing. And why China? So I was always quite interested in Asian culture and Chinese culture. And after university, I traveled Southeast Asia for around 6 months. And during that period, I wanted to travel on to China. But as you may be aware, it's not easy to get a visa. And I didn't know that at the time because I hadn't planned properly. So I made a decision to basically go back to the UK and then sort everything else and basically get a job lined up, which was a teaching job, and then come over to Shanghai and China and spend some time. And originally it was meant to be maybe 1 year, and that quickly spiraled into 7 years. I've been here now. So, yeah,
Perfect. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And the Chinese New Year, I know something about it, but very, very vague stuff. I know that every year there's a different animal. This year, which animal is it?
Yeah, it's a great question. This year is the year of the snake.
And in
Yeah.
Chinese culture, like what does a snake kind of stand for and mean, if anything?
Good question, actually. I actually should know. I don't really know. The what I can say is last year was the year of the dragon, which is supposedly the most auspicious year, the best year. So if you're born in the year of the dragon, then it could very well be your year. Likewise, if you're born in the year of the snake, it could very well be your year. So the snake in particular, I'd have to go and have a look, to be honest. Yeah.
Because in English, if you call someone a snake, it's like someone who might go behind your back and do something kind of a bit dodgy. They're not a very respectful person. They might like stab you in the back. You could say, "Ah, what a snake." So in English, at least, it's not a very positive connotation. Hopefully in Chinese, it's different.
You're absolutely right. And I don't think there's a negative connotation like that in China. And obviously there's 12 different zodiac animals. And I don't think any of them have a particularly negative connotation, like everything is negative. It's akin to how we have star signs. There may be some negative aspects, but there's also some positive aspects as well.
Okay. If anybody who is watching this knows what a snake actually means for the Chinese New Year, then please let us know and we can clear up that kind of doubt.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, let's go back to university and then we'll move on to you traveling around Southeast Asia and China in more depth. But at uni, what did you study?
So nothing to do with Chinese or Asian culture. Um, I studied sports science, so sports and exercise science, which is about the body and health and fitness and exercise and sport, basically. And I always feel a bit embarrassed when I say that because I think a lot of people have this misconception, I might add, that lots of people who study sports science are perhaps not that academic. Uh, but I think there are lots of smart people that study sports science.
And why did you choose this degree?
Sure, yeah. So I loved sports as a kid. So it's quite funny to think about actually. But when I was at school, I was not the most hardworking student. I was very sociable and very active. So I was very sociable and enjoyed a lot of sports and exercise and activity and adventuring a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so I studied sport and exercise science. I did also study a master's in human nutrition as well. And both of these degrees have absolutely influenced my life big time. So although I don't work in that field of health, I absolutely pay attention to that and still exercise and try to eat healthily and keep a balanced diet, etc., etc.
Okay, interesting. I say it's interesting in particular because I was also kind of wondering whether to go down this route and study physiotherapy and become like, who knows, maybe a personal trainer or working in the area of sport because it was always something that I was good at, that I kind of got a kick out of as well. Like I enjoyed
Uh,
sport and I still enjoy sport to this day, as you can see, wearing my retro England shirt and you've got Ellen Road here. So I'm a big footy fan. I love
mm,
football. But
mhm.
in your case, what sports did you like growing up, and do you still like them to this day?
Yeah, I was a footballer at school. I also played rugby, cricket, tennis. But yeah, football was my main sport, really. I loved football as a kid growing up. Yeah.
And now, do you still play?
Now, yeah, no, I was about to get onto that. So, nowadays, not so much. Um, no, I'm very unfit now, actually, compared to compared to before.
Well, what's happened?
Oh, I'm busy with work. This all the different types of work I'm very busy with. As in, I have a full-time job. I also have a lot of teaching and community building and Instagram and YouTube building as well in my hours spent away from my full-time job.
I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. You've got a lot of things
Uh,
going on, and you're kind of juggling all of these different tasks at the same time. One more
Absolutely.
question related to sport. I can hear that you have a very RP accent. You have a very southern accent in English. So I assume you are a Manchester United fan, right?
What? Why are you assuming I'm a Manchester United fan?
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Uh,
But maybe it's
okay.
true because we have this kind of joke in England that in the past there were many Southern Glory supporters who were from
Mm,
some south of England who would support Manchester United because they were at the time the most successful team. So yeah,
I
who
see.
support.
Yeah, fair enough. When I was a kid, it actually kind of fits into your narrative as well because I supported Chelsea randomly because it was in fact, people will probably, if they're football fans, will be able to guess my age here, but it was the year that Abramovich bought the club. That was when I started to like really support Chelsea. I won't say my age then because then people, yeah.
If
Um,
anyone wants to guess, let us know in the comments.
yeah, sure, you can guess. Uh, I was gonna add something to that, but who do you support?
As Leeds United.
Oh, of
So
course, yeah,
I
okay,
mean, but
fair
I'm
enough.
technically not from Leeds, but my
Uh-huh.
parents were Leeds fans, and I'm from a town which is in the outskirts, but it's kind of closer to Bradford than it is to Leeds. So
Okay,
if we're being very, very anal about it, I should, in theory, support Bradford City, but it's not the case.
okay, fair enough. Well, my dad's a Huddersfield fan, so yeah,
Okay.
he might have a bit of rivalry there. But yeah, my dad's from was born around near Huddersfield, not
Perfect.
far from Leeds at all.
Nah, right next to it. And how about you?
Yeah,
Where were you brought up?
yeah. So I was brought up in the south, so you guess very, very well. I was brought up in Silverstone, if you know where Silverstone is, where the Formula One racing track is. So it's Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire border. It's countryside really. It's a village.
Perfect. So you're a country boy, you went to uni, you did sports science, and then you thought, I want to go to Southeast Asia. So tell me about your travels. Where did you go?
It's a funny story actually, looking back on it. It's like all over the place. But I always wanted to travel, and then I kind of did uni because, as you can probably understand, I think a lot of people, particularly at that time, a lot of people were kind of, if you had the opportunity to go to university, people were like, oh, you should go. And so people kind of did without even really, yeah, I was like, I enjoy playing sport. I'm going to study sports science. It was just not really long sighted at all. But anyway, I don't regret any of it. I had a fantastic time. But, um, but yeah, sorry, what was your question?
It was about Southeast Asia. You went traveling in Southeast Asia. Which countries did you visit?
Sure. So I visited Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Singapore, Vietnam, Laos. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Those were
And now,
all of that. That was all of gone.
which ones were the best? Which countries would you want to return to?
I've been to Vietnam several times since I initially traveled there. I will go to Thailand later this week. Uh, well, because it's Chinese New Year, so I can barely remember what day it is, but I will travel to Thailand in a couple of days' time. And I mean, I would go back to all of these countries. I've got a passion for travel. I'm a bit of a travel fanatic. Um, yeah, so I would go back to all of these countries. It's more a case of being strategic in like which countries don't I go back to? Where do I really, really want to go to? And I like new things. I'm a bit of a sucker for a place that I haven't been to before, although I have been to Thailand before and I'll return. But that's because it's not too far from where we are here in Shanghai. And yeah, it's not it's not like, I don't need to we don't need to get on an aeroplane and turn left, which becomes a lot more expensive.
No, it's interesting because all of these places, like they're beautiful. Many people go there on like a gap year as well. And usually Thailand is kind of like the gateway to Asia. for many Westerners because
Yeah.
they're so used to having so many tourists from Europe, from the United States, from Australia as well. So that's usually kind of where people might start. And then they'll like venture off into different areas of Asia from there. Um,
Mhm.
in my case, when I went to Southeast Asia, I did it almost the opposite way around because Thailand was like the last place. And then from Thailand, I returned to Europe. But I
Mhm.
visited the places that you mentioned. I didn't go to Vietnam. I didn't go to Laos. So for me,
Mhm.
there are still many places in Asia and Southeast Asia that have yet to be ticked off on my bucket
Mhm.
list.
Mhm.
Hopefully, I can head there at some point in the near future. Fingers crossed.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. You should definitely go to Vietnam. It's amazing. I think if I had to recommend one country to visit out of the ones I listed, that would be the one because there's such a mix of there's just it has everything. There's such a nice mix of like phenomenal nature. There's quaint old cities like in Hanoi with lots of history. There's beaches in the south and even on the coast. And it's such a convenient country to travel because you can travel from either the north to the south or the south to the north. And it's like a super long, like, well, it's just very long along the coast. So, yeah, I would absolutely recommend like traveling up or down Vietnam.
Perfect. I'll write it down. Keep a note of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely
Uh,
do.
from there, let's focus on China. So, you got a visa to go to China. Was there anything in particular that you really wanted to live or experience in China that like pushed you and convinced you to choose China as your place to live?
It's a good question. I think I wanted so I definitely wanted to live in Asia. That was 100%. Yeah, I was fixed on that. I was 100% sure that I was coming to Asia. Um, but I do remember quite clearly actually kind of weighing up in my mind, do I go to Japan or China? Uh, and no, I'm not entirely sure what made me make a final decision. There were a couple of things that did sway my decision, which were that I had two really good friends that were already in China, um, which it sounds a little bit mm, cowardly, but when you're moving across the world for the first time. Uh, I had traveled 6 months before, but when you're moving your life across the world for the first time or for any time, you do clutch onto those kind of little things that just make you feel a little bit more like, okay, well, if I don't make any friends, then at least I've got Bob, yeah, my friend. Yeah, I think that was probably oh, I know. Wait, sorry. I haven't woken up. I wanted to learn Chinese as well. That was a huge part of it. Like, did I want to learn Japanese or Chinese? And I always wanted to learn Chinese from that question.
Okay, so 7 years on from this moment, how's your Chinese?
Oh, it's a good question. It's not bad. I reckon I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I think I'm around B2. I'm definitely B1 or B2, or maybe probably not C1. I know which test I've done in like the Chinese standard, which is HSK, is it Hanyu Shouping Kaoshi? Is the standard Chinese test, which you could think about like an IELTS test or TOEFL or similar to that kind of standardized test. Um, and I did HSK 5 in that, which was there was when I did that, it's like 3 or 4 years ago, that was the second most difficult test. So there was HSK 6 above that, and I haven't done that one, but I've done HSK 5, which is the one just below. So yeah, I think I'm around B1 or B2 to answer your question.
I mean, that sounds like it's a lot of hard work. And I've mentioned on previous podcasts that I'm a bit of a coward, like you mentioned, because I've chosen easy, quote unquote, languages to learn.
No.
Are more similar to English. So then there are always some similarities, the same alphabet, basically. But with Chinese, like, there are so many things that you have to learn before you even get to the point where you can have like a basic conversation, or at least that's the impression I get. So, like,
Yeah.
how have you learned it?
It's a good question. Happy to answer. Which languages do you speak?
So, I speak Spanish like pretty much fluent, and then I dabble in other like Romance languages, but a lot of them I never really have time to practice them anymore. So I get so rusty to the point where I'd need to do like an intensive course to get good at them again. And they are, well, Italian and Portuguese, I can kind of get by, but then if I'm thinking of a word, the word will probably just come to me in Spanish. And then French, because I live in Brussels at the moment, my French is all right, but I don't have that real need to be good at French because I live in Brussels and many people
Mhm.
speak other languages at the same time. And my like social groups are like Spaniards or other people that speak really good English. So I do want to get better at French, and that's one of my New Year's resolutions for this year. But then it's about finding the time and prioritizing it. And sadly, it's not really a priority compared to like other objectives that I have at the moment. So yeah, all languages, but Spanish is the only one that I'm actually very good at.
Mm. No, no. And where you are at the moment, is it Flemish that they speak primarily?
No, so it's interesting that technically Brussels is in the Flemish part, because it's just more to the north than to the south. But in Brussels, they are bilingual. So in all of the street signs, you see the Flemish and the French. And then because it's so international, more people learn French and speak French because it's a more international language. So the go-to language in Brussels is French, but if not, probably English before Flemish, because the Flemish cities are Bruges, Ghent, and Antwerp, really. And if you go for a day out in any of these cities, that's where you'd either use Flemish or English. And people might be able to get by in French, but I don't know, maybe a cultural divide. They prefer not to use French and use their mother
Yeah,
tongue, Flemish, or just English, which is a kind of international language.
I fully understand. It's quite interesting. In Shanghai, we have Shanghainese, which is a dialect, and local people, some local people, and particularly older people, will speak it. And yeah, it's almost the same as what you've just mentioned in terms of like, I think they'd rather speak. If they can speak it with other people, they will speak it. Uh, yeah, yeah.
And going back to your Chinese, like, have you done any specific courses or do you have like a regular teacher to help you out?
So I think I reckon we may be in a similar boat. So maybe in the same boat of I can get by and I'm not really actively studying Mandarin now. I'm not um practicing vocabulary or like reciting Tongyu, which is an idiom. I'm not reciting that. I'm not actively studying the language anymore because I'm very busy with other things, as we said, and also I can get by. I can do everything I need to do, you know, with, relatively simply. Well, yeah, I can do everything I need to do if I need to do it. And so I'm not actively studying, but when I first came to the country, I was really very, very disciplined in terms of like trying to study. I'm quite an autodidact, as in like I like to study, I like to learn stuff, and so I teach myself. And the way I typically do that is by trying to complete the task. And if I don't complete the task successfully, I reflect and kind of figure out why I didn't do it successfully, and then go back and try again. So that, and this is probably great advice for any students listening here. Uh, you, you and I don't want to sound yeah. Obviously, teachers are extremely useful as well, but you can absolutely go to a dictionary online or offline, read some vocabulary or find a new piece of vocabulary and try and use that with a teacher. So go to the next class that you have with Lewis or with any teacher that you may have. You can have a couple of words written down mentally or actually written down and try to use these words in the class. And the teacher will be like, well, they might be like, what are you talking about? I don't even know that word. Or they might be like, oh, well done. That's a great word to know, and you've taught yourself that word. So that's kind of that's pretty much how I was learning. I did have some classes sometimes, etc., but I didn't have a real systematic way of learning Chinese.
I mean, if you can get by, then perfect. All good.
Yeah.
No need to worry
Yeah,
about it. Now,
exactly.
I want to know a little bit more about China and cultural shocks because we're a bit pressed for time today. So this conversation will be slightly shorter than usual. But yeah, Alex, when you got to China, what were the biggest culture shocks and did it kind of live up to your expectations?
Oh, that's a great question. I remember arriving in China, and for those that don't know, you need a VPN in China, which is basically a virtual private network. And what that means is you can access several websites that you wouldn't be able to access if you didn't have that from China. So you can't access things like Google and Instagram and Facebook without one of these. And so I didn't have one when I first arrived. And obviously, I went onto Google Maps to try and find my way to the hotel. And I couldn't use Google Maps. And obviously I was panicking. All the road signs are in Chinese, Mandarin characters. People can only speak Chinese Mandarin. And I had been studying, I had tried to learn a few words, and it's just not the same as as actually being in the country and trying to speak it, because it's a tonal language as well. So yeah, that was a culture shock. And there's always things that shock me. Uh, yeah, but that's the biggest one that I can think of off the top of my head.
And now, like, have you got used to living in China after 7 years?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so there's a few culture shocks, in fact, and I'm actually a bit apprehensive to say them now because I don't know if I'm trying to think, are they culture shocks or are they actually just things that people do globally, but I don't do them, or I didn't do them before? Like such as so I have a partner here, and whenever if I don't do it anymore because I know how she feels about it. But if I come into the apartment and try and sit down anywhere, or on a sofa or on a chair or anywhere, it's immediately like, no, you can get changed. So it's like you have to. There's like indoor clothes and outdoor clothes. That's a huge thing here. You can't really. People don't wear their outdoor clothes in the apartment. Like, this is obviously an outdoor shirt, as well. Obvious, maybe not obvious, but
I
but
don't
like
know.
but trousers and things like that, you can't be wearing like jeans that you've worn out to a restaurant the day before. You can't be wearing them in the apartment. Not in my apartment, anyway.
Interesting. I mean, this is definitely a culture shock. Like, I would have no idea that this is a thing. Like, it's common in most countries, I think, that when you enter a house, you take off your shoes. I get this. It makes sense because, of course, if you're walking around, in particular, if it's wet and muddy, you don't want to bring that inside and get like the carpet all wet and muddy as well. But yeah, changing your whole outfit, that's next
I
level
mean,
cleanliness.
that is next level. I mean, just to be clear, I don't mean if you're like visiting a friend's house, by the way. That's not the case. It's more just for
Like, have you brought
family. Like,
pajamas?
yeah, do you want to borrow some pajamas, mate?
Excellent. And other things that I'm always curious about when I ask people these kind of questions is the food. Like, Chinese food is kind of all over the world. Every city has plenty of Chinese restaurants. The Chinese food that we eat in Europe, is it similar to the Chinese food that Chinese people actually eat?
Not really. In a word, in a nutshell, not really. Uh, but yeah, there are sometimes I order food here or I have food out here and I think, oh, this tastes like English, Chinese food. But what you know the expression, you don't know what you don't know, and it's in China there are so many different types of cuisine. Like that in the south they have less strong flavors, or like maybe even like sweet and sour, that kind of thing would be in the south. You have Sichuan food, which is very spicy, and that's from the southwest. In the east, where I am in Shanghai, there's lots of like dumplings. Xiaolongbao is a very famous type of dumpling, and maybe even like fish and seafood around Zhejiang, which is the province that I'm in. In the north, in Beijing, they have roast duck. Like that's a very famous traditional food. That's from Beijing. I mean, I'm not going to tell you all the different regions and all the, but you probably know what I'm about to say. And that in England, if you order Chinese food, you don't need to think about, oh, is it from the north? But here, because we're here, we probably wouldn't. We don't often eat roast duck in Shanghai. If we went to Beijing, we absolutely would eat roast duck. But also something just to add on to that is that what you also need to consider is that China is basically the size of Europe. So it's like, you can imagine Shanghai as, I don't, for argument's sake, the UK, and then you can imagine like Beijing as Germany or whatever. But that's kind of the difference in the size of the region and the areas. That's how you can compare them. So yeah, um, yeah, I don't remember the original question, but it
No, it
was
was
a
all
fun.
about
Oh, the food.
you
Yeah.
answered that. Basically, it's very different. And as I kind of imagined, that it depends in China where you are, then the food will be very, very different. And like, there are images of documentaries of lots of markets as well. And at the markets, then that's where you might try the kind of very adventurous stuff, like
Mm.
spiders or scorpions and stuff like this. Like, have you dared to try any of this street food?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, in Shanghai, we don't have many like night markets like that with food nowadays. There was a big regulation around it a few years ago, and we don't have it. Um, I have tried food like that when I was traveling in Southeast Asia. I've eaten scorpion, I think, in Thailand. I've had snake. I've had plenty of kind of bizarre food, and there is some, yeah, there are some kind of adventurous food here too, like pig brain I've had here not too long ago, and uh, duck blood is one that is quite commonly eaten. It sounds disgusting, but it doesn't taste
I'm
that
sure it's
bad at all.
delicious. It's just like getting over the fact of like knowing what it actually is. And I'm going to ask you one final question, and then we'll call it a day.
Sure, sure.
So what is the plan moving forward? Are you planning on staying in China? Are you planning on any nice kind of like trips within China, given that it is basically the size of Europe? So yeah, what are your plans in the near future?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So short term, I will be going on holiday next week, so super excited for that. And over the next couple of days, I'm recording some video classes for a course that I have coming out very soon. So looking forward to cracking on with that as well. After Thailand, after that trip, I will go back to my full-time job. So I'll be, yeah, planning trips for schools and yeah, back in full swing of it. but then also maintaining my Instagram and YouTube and the community that I have, which has been going really well over the past 6 months, and is very rewarding, as I said to you earlier. So yeah, that's kind of the plan. Long term, long term, I love Shanghai. I really love Shanghai. So I think I will. Sorry, that was my cat just meowed. I'm not sure if you would have
Yeah.
picked that up.
I didn't hear it, but say hello to your cat for us.
Yeah, I think I've accidentally. He's in the bedroom. So yeah, I can't be too long. But I've accidentally shut the door to the bedroom. But anyway, long term, I'll be in Shanghai, I believe, and I may potentially go back to the UK or somewhere else, but that will be a good few years away yet.
Interesting.
How about
Well,
yourself?
we will see
Before we
what happens.
leave,
In my case, like living in Brussels at the moment, I don't plan on living here forever. Um, People who've listened to a lot of these conversations will know that my kind of aim in the near future is to return to Spain, where my partner is from. And Spain is amazing. I love it as a country and the way of life, all of the stuff. So I see my short, medium, and long term living in Spain because I lived there previously. I speak the language. And yeah, I feel very comfortable in Spain, probably in Seville, but in Seville, it's very, very hot for like 4 months in summer. So if I was living in Seville, I would need to have some kind of escape in summer, which could be the United Kingdom, or it could be by the beach in Spain. So let's see, anything could happen. Maybe I'll win the lottery, and then from there, I'll buy mansions around the world, and I'll just spend 1 month in a different country. That would be the dream.
it's all right for some.
I know. We first I need to buy a lottery ticket, and then we can see what happens.
Me too.
Awesome. So anyway, let's call it a day there because we are a bit pressed for time, as I said earlier. But thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interesting insight into Alex's life and China. And if you have any further questions for him, feel free to follow him on Instagram or YouTube and send him a message, or you can just write it in the comments as well. Whatever tickles your fancy, whatever you prefer. And yeah,
Whatever
Alex,
floats your boat.
whatever
Yeah.
floats your boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Lewis, for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, thanks to anybody watching. Give me a follow. And yeah, hope to see you soon.
Perfect. So have a great day and see you next time. Bye bye.
See you later.